Hey everybody, this is Joel. I'm down at Boom Comics in Topeka, Kansas. This is the remake of the introduction to the Dryden Sci-Fi universe. We've had so many changes in the universe that the previous description really wasn't accurate anymore, and I wanted to stop and take a break and sort of get the videos back lined up with the actual reality. So the idea behind the Dryden science fiction universe is that we have taken sort of the foundations of a science fiction universe, like a Star Wars or Star Trek kind of universe, and we've placed them under the Creative Commons 4.0 BYSA license. And what that license tells us is that anybody else can come in and use the materials in the universe free of charge without having to get any license or permission or anything, as long as they'll also put their materials under the Creative Commons 4.0 BYSA and acknowledge that it's Dryden material. And we've been working on this particular universe, the science fiction universe, for a little over 3 years now, and I have to tell you, it is fantastic. We have literally entire empires coming online. I spoke to Eugene Kelly yesterday, and he has this idea for about 500 years of the future, way far out, 40,000 years out in the future, where this empire rises up near galactic center and it reaches all the way to Sol, and then it collapses back in on itself. Blah 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 blah. And that's just one week. Greta van der Roel a couple of weeks ago brought another empire in that lives about 20,000 years out in the star cluster M24. It's about 1,000 planets out there, and she's building all of that. And it's just fantastic. We're growing so fast. We have so much art. The Big Damn Dryden role-playing game, which is coming out within the next couple of months. We're about to start beta testing on it. Is set in the very first era of our universe, and it's just great. We're just growing really great. And this is sort of the orientation video for the science fiction universe inside of Dryden. So the idea behind the way the universe is set up is that we wanted to be able to address a lot of different genres of science fiction. We wanted everybody who was interested in science fiction to have access. And so we needed a way to both handle things that were very hard sci-fi, very Arthur C. Clarke, things that were cyberpunk, very human world sort of things, all the way out to flying space dragons, right? We wanted to embrace the whole thing. Cthulhu, everybody who might be interested in science fiction, well, not Cthulhu itself, but dark science fiction that was not at all hard science fiction. And our solution to this was to break the universe up into sort of four general areas. And these aren't just lines in the sand, but to set up changes in genre as we go forward in time. So what you find is starting the day after tomorrow out until the year 2600, we have a predominantly human-driven science fiction, hard science fiction universe. The faster than light travel rules are very well defined. There's a video on them here on the Dryden Home channel. The corporations that rule human space are very well defined, and they're also here on the channel. And things behave very much like you would expect, sort of a near future. It's a future that you and I would recognize. We have a lot of work that's gone on. As I mentioned, the role-playing game is happening in that era. The Il Solitaire, which were designed by Charlotte Garnier, are in that era. Alder's World, which I wrote, is in that era. There's a whole lot of development. It's pretty well mapped out, but it's really a very small bubble of space. It runs for about 300 light years out from Sol. That's the human space that this adventure happens in, or this part of the adventure happens in. And what's going on sort of on the side is a lot of humans are leaving known space, and nobody really knows where they go. They just kind of disappear, and then they'll reappear later. Then in the year 2600, things change very dramatically for humans. In that year, the Europan, which is the life form that lives on the bottom of the ocean of Europa, rises up. It's had a lot of problems with humans. It's had a lot of problems with pollution on the planet, and it decides to drive the humans off of Europa, and then goes on and begins building organic spaceships and takes over human space, most of human space. And at the same time that that's going on, the Il Solitaire, which are actually from Earth, they're Cetacean human hybrids, so they're flying whale spaceships. Literally, the art is fantastic. Check it out on the Dryden Author and Artist page. Also are very concerned about the human expansion. They've had particular problems with a corporation called CertCorp that is very exploitative and destroys ecosystems. And they step in also and begin to control human behavior. And so what happens then is we begin the Belle Epoque, which means age of beauty, and human space, as we've recognized it for the first few hundred years, that 300 light year bubble is no longer really under human control. But what's gone on is that humans who have been leaving human space for the last several hundred years begin to have their own civilizations. And what happens is that the science gets much softer. We start looking for Star Wars kind of universes that are much more sort of space fantasy, not way out space fantasy. That comes later. But any place that you have watched a story where there was an empire that was largely human or partly human and also other alien species, and we weren't really sure how the technologies worked. They were just sort of cool. Battle Beyond the Stars comes to mind. I think The Last Starfighter would sort of fit in that genre. Whole empires begin to rise up, and this era lasts for about 40,000 years. And what we're looking for in this era is that there are 10 billion stars in the galaxy. So if we had empires of 1 million star systems, we could have 1,000 of those in the Milky Way. Right. So, and really, you don't need 1 million stars to have an empire. I hate to break it to you. And then, of course, over the course of 40,000 years, empires will rise and fall. So, what we're doing in this empire or in this era, and Greta is an excellent example of that, is people are approaching us. They're saying, "We really like your concept. I already have some ideas for a universe or for an empire, and I want to bring it in." And we're sort of starting to lace the galaxy together by empires. Eugene Kelly that I talked to yesterday. Actually, his empire is in the dark, but it very much follows this model. It's a group of humans who rise up against their overlords somewhere near the galactic center and go into this um, uh, nationalist crusade to reclaim human space, and they're looking for Earth at that point. Contact has been lost with Earth, which I'll explain in a minute when I talk about the dark. But this is a place where somebody who is an empire builder, even if you want to tell relatively small stories, but you want to have your own environment for it, or if you just want to plug your story into an existing environment, we've got big spaces of the galaxy available to us. It can be alien, it can be human. The science is pretty soft. This is a lot of sort of traditional space fantasy. The not so hard science fiction happens out in this era. We've got a lot of growth going on, and I invite you to come on in and bring something new to us. We've got a whole lot of galaxy to work with, and we'd love to see your environment. All right. Well, then about 40,000 years out, the Technoprey rise up. And the Technoprey are an alien species that was designed by Gavin Revitt. And the Technoprey are a sort of ant-like, hive-like creatures, and they live inside of gas giant planets, and they've largely undetected by the world around them. Just because they live deep in high-pressure environments, we wouldn't even really necessarily recognize them as life. Sort of the conventional description is if you tried to build a battery, a chemical battery, under the pressure of the interior of a gas giant, and that thing became conscious. Right, so we have a hard time even recognizing them as life forms. Humans do, but every 40,000 years or so, they, like termites, come all hoarding out of their mounds, and or in this case, out of their gas giants, and just destroy anything in the star system that they're in. They're energy consumers, and there are millions and millions of them, and they build shells that are maybe silicone or something. We don't really know what they are, polymer shells, so that they can escape from their planets. And then they migrate off into the stars where they can be found drifting around if you happen to stop by them. But they really destroy everything, and it's a clean sweep for us to sort of reset our galaxy. And in this case, the Europan is still around, and the Europan makes a terrible mistake. He tries to merge his technology with Technoprey in order to stop them, and he creates what's called the Scourge. And the Scourge not only kill Technoprey, they kill pretty much everything else they run across, and they mutate extremely quickly. And what we're setting up with the Scourge is we're setting up a dark horror fiction environment, space fiction environment, where you don't know what the next creature that you're going to run into is, but it's going to be out to kill you, and it's going to be a mutant, and it's going to be terrifying. And Eugene is started talking about maybe some sort of cross-dimensional creature bringing in a very necromancer sort of feeling kind of way. Not necromancer, the science fiction, but necromancer from fantasy, evil wizard kind of way. So that you end up with evil beings and the scourge all working together in this very nightmarish sort of environment. And that's the dark. And his empire actually happens right at the beginning of the dark. Then the fourth era is largely undefined. I talked to a woman today who has a feline species that she's interested in talking about, and we're talking about whether or not this might be a Codex 2. I'm going to meet with her on Friday, and we're going to see about bringing her empire that has these uh, very, very unusual aliens, not hard sci-fi aliens at all. And that's Codex 2. Okay, so after the Scourge clean the galaxy, everything goes quiet for a while. And now we get things that are just fantastic. I tell everybody that this is the land of the flying space dragons. We haven't had anybody write any flying space dragons for us yet, but this is the place for things that are really, really fantasy, but also go into sci-fi. So one of the images that always comes into my mind is a book that I read many years ago. I think it was maybe called Shattered World, where the planet, it was just one planet, but it had been broken and was floating in space, and people sailed dragonhide spaceship or dragonhide sailing ships back and forth between the chunks of planet, right? So not at all science, but space fantasy. That world is largely unexplored. I'm very interested in these cat creatures, and I think that they may belong out there. But that goes on indefinitely into the future then with whatever sort of magical space, fairies, dragon, science, weirdness that you want to put in there. And there just are no rules. The laws of physics may be comfortably ignored at that point. And that's the four eras of Dryden. If you are interested, I hope that this has been interesting to you and you're interested in getting in touch with us and talking about how to develop. The place to go, first of all, is right here on the Dryden home page, where we keep a lot of videos about different parts of the universe. There's also a WordPress blog that I'll put a link to. It mostly deals with the primer right now, but we will continue expanding it. And absolutely stop by the Dryden author and artist page on Facebook, which is where we all kind of hang out and chat and meet some folks. The best way to get a hold of me is through my email, which is drydenexperiment at Yahoo. That's drydenexperiment at Yahoo. Tell us what you're interested in doing. Tell us if you'd like to work off of somebody else's work and develop it some more. You've got a story you'd like to place in somebody else's, some components of theirs that you'd like to use, or bring something entirely new to us. We're always growing. This universe is a fabulous place, and we'd love to have you be a part of it.